26. 1 Samuel chapter 26. And beginning in verse 1, now the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah, saying, is David not hiding in the hill of Hachilah opposite Jeshimon? Then Saul arose, and he went down to the wilderness of Ziph, having 3,000 chosen men of Israel with him to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul encamped in the hill of Hachilah, which is opposite Jeshimon by the road. But David stayed in the wilderness, and he saw that Saul came after him into the wilderness. David therefore sent out spies and understood that Saul had indeed come. It almost seems like we have read this before, and truthfully, we have. Although he publicly acknowledged that David would be the next king of Israel, Saul continued his pursuit of his son-in-law. It may have been now close to 10 years since David had been anointed by Samuel to be the next king of Israel. But Samuel had died, and Saul tried everything in his power to thwart God's plan, but he was unsuccessful because the Lord continued to preserve David's life from his adversary. Now, at one point, David, you remember, had it in his power to rid himself once and for all of his enemy, Saul. You remember David and his men were hiding in a cave. And then Saul came in and did not know that David was there. And some of his men said, David, this is the moment. God's given you the opportunity. Strike him, get rid of him. And David, you remember, crawled up towards Saul and cut a piece of his robe and then felt convicted after the fact and said that he would not stretch out his hand against God's anointed, even though he was provoked by his soldiers. But for a second time, David's whereabouts were revealed to Saul, and he set his sights on David's destruction. And David will again seek to prove his innocence as he refuses to destroy Saul. Now, previously, as I said in chapter 24, David hid. This time, David is intentional in proving his innocence. For in verse 5, David arose and he came to the place where Saul had encamped. And David saw the place where Saul lay, and Abner, the son of Ner, the commander of his army. And Saul lay within the camp with the people encamped all around him. And David answered, and he said to Ahimelech the Hittite and to Abishai the son of Zeruiah, brother of Joab, saying, who will go down with me into the camp? And Abishai said, I'll go down with you. And so David and Abishai came to the people by night, and there Saul lay sleeping within the camp with his spear stuck in the ground by his head. And Abner and the people lay around him. And Abishai said to David, God has delivered your enemy into your hand this day. Therefore, please let me strike him at once with the spear right to the earth, and I will not have to strike him a second time. But David said to Abishai, do not destroy him. Who can stretch out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? And David said, furthermore, as the Lord lives, the Lord shall strike him, or his days shall come to die, or he'll go out to battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed. But please, take the spear and the jug of water that are by his head and let us go. As David and two of his men go down in this reconnaissance mission, they get close to where Saul was encamped. And when they arrived there, everyone was fast asleep. And one thing that is mentioned that we have seen before was Saul's spear. The spear that Saul had thrown at David more than once in attempted murder. The spear that was thrown at David's best friend, Jonathan. The spear that symbolized all of Saul's hatred and pursuit. This time, David's soldier said to David, hey, listen, God's delivered you. Almost like he's given you another opportunity. You missed the first one, but here's a second one. And listen, you don't even have to get your hands dirty. I'll do it. I'll do it for you. I'll strike him down with his own spear. This is an easy target. Abishai said David would not have to even get involved. Just give the order and I'll take the shot. Keep in mind that Saul had vowed already that he was done pursuing David. He lied. He was still chasing him. What a temptation this must have been. I mean, you got the opportunity to end your misery. I mean, it's right here. You can deal with it in the moment and it'll be over with. This guy has made your life miserable for a decade. Took you away from your family, gave your wife to somebody else. That would be upsetting. I mean, this is it. Just deal with it. And guess what? You get to use the same spear that he threw at you. How about that? Is that not poetic justice to take the spear that he threw at you and take him out, David? But David wisely, again, refused. Instead of taking matters into his own hand, notice David had another idea. It says in verse 12, David took the spear and the jug of water by Saul's head, and they got away. And notice this, no man saw it or knew it or awoke. Why? For they were all asleep because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen on them. It's like the Lord put all of these guys to sleep and didn't allow them to wake up. They were deep in sleep. God was preserving his servant. They didn't know that David was there. And David went over to the other side and he stood on the top of the hill from afar off. And notice with the great distance being between them, David called out to the people and to Abner, the son of Ner. And he said, "Do you not answer, Abner?" And Abner answered and said, "Who are you?" calling out to the king. And David said to Abner, "Are you not a man? And who is like you in Israel? Why then have you not guarded your Lord the king of Israel? Why then have you not guarded the Lord the king? For one of the people came in to destroy your Lord the king. This thing you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die because you have not guarded your master, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is and the jug of water that was by his head." David takes the spear, takes the water, gets a safe distance away, and then begins to shout, placing the spear and the jug of water far from where Saul was. And he's crying out to Abner, who failed his post. Saul could have been a dead man. His bodyguard didn't have his eyes open. He was fast asleep. But then you see that Saul responds to David. Saul knew David's voice. And he said, "Is that your voice, my son, David?" David said, "It is my voice, O Lord, my king." And then David presents his innocence once again to Saul, trying to prove that he had no ill intention, no intention of destroying him. And he says in verse 18, "Why does my Lord pursue his servant? What have I done? What evil is in my hand? I mean, tell me. I mean, here you are chasing me. I haven't done anything to you. What's going on?" David does not understand. He wants to understand. He's asking. But it's hard to deal with someone who's irrational, someone who is living in sin and turning against you. "Therefore, please, let my Lord the king hear the words of his servant. If the Lord has stirred you up against me, then let him accept an offering. But if it's the children of men, then may they be cursed before the Lord. For they have driven me out this day from sharing in the inheritance of the Lord, saying, 'Go serve other gods.' So now do not let my blood fall to the earth before the face of the Lord, for the king of Israel has come out to seek a flea as one who hunts a partridge in the mountains." David he just wants answers. Tell me why. Why is this happening? It's obvious from the two separate occasions that he did not intend to kill Saul, or he would have been dead already. If the Lord, David said, has stirred you up against me, just tell me. I'll offer a sacrifice. I'll pay a vow. I'll do whatever to get right with the Lord. But he said, if it's people that surround you who are lying to you, then let them be accursed. This confession of loyalty to the Lord is important. For David had already, you remember, he had sought asylum in Philistine territory, and he's about to do so again. It makes it clear that David has not renounced his God. He's been faithful. He hasn't done anything to deserve the kind of treatment that he deserved. But for a third time in the story that we've watched, we see Saul say, "I have sinned." In verse 21, then Saul said, "I have sinned. Return, my son David, for I will harm you no more, because my life was precious in your eyes this day. Indeed, I have played the fool and erred exceedingly." You remember when Saul was confronted by Samuel after his failure to wipe out the Amalekites, that he twice acknowledged that he had sinned. His son, Jonathan, had actually warned Saul that taking David's life would be a sin. And now Saul admits the truth concerning this. Saul acknowledged his sin. Listen, he never repented or turned from it. He acknowledged it. I've sinned. But it didn't change anything. It's not like it altered the course. He admitted that he had sinned, but he didn't turn from sin. It's one thing to admit it. It's another thing to actually repent of it, to turn from it, to not continue in it. And these are lies. Oh, David, come on home. I promise I won't. Right. No way. This guy's a liar. He's acknowledged his sin, but he does not repent of it. Folks, don't make the mistake of acknowledging sin without truly repenting of it, turning from it. There's a vast difference. And then notice this phrase right here at the end of verse 21 where Saul says, I have played the fool and erred exceedingly. I believe that statement right there could sum up Saul's entire life. This could be on the epitaph of his tombstone. I have played the fool and erred exceedingly. This is the summation of Saul's life. How does someone play the fool and err exceedingly? What can you find as you look at Saul's life and discover why this was a true statement? Here's how you know. A person plays the fool and errs exceedingly when they walk in pride instead of humility. That was Saul. You remember when Saul began, he was humble in his own eyes before the Lord. But over time, he became inflated with his ego, with his pride. Saul had slain his thousands, David his 10,000s. That infuriated Saul. He was also proud in the sense when Jonathan got a victory, Saul wanted to take credit for it. The man built a monument to himself. I mean, it doesn't get any more arrogant than that. What you building, Saul? A monument to who? Who do you think? Myself. I mean, yes. You play the fool and you err exceedingly when you choose to walk in pride instead of humility. It's foolish. But another characteristic of the individual that plays the fool and errs exceedingly is they walk in disobedience instead of obedience to God's word. This is what characterized Saul's life. His life was marked by rebellion, disobedience. Saul's life was partial obedience. He did what he wanted to do, but disregarded what God said he was supposed to do. Listen, partial obedience is disobedience. Saul, have you done all the Lord's? Yeah, I totally did everything he said, Samuel. I mean, check it out. Why do I hear the sheep in the background? Oh, that was the people. The people wanted the sheep. So we could sacrifice them to your God. There you have it. I mean, it's not true. He was disobedient consistently. The person plays the fool who walks in disobedience to God's word instead of obedience. We also find that a person plays the fool, listen to this, when they make excuses for sin instead of repenting of it. This was something, again, that marked Saul's life of leadership, consistently making excuses, blaming somebody else, always the victim, never the culprit. Never taking responsibility. Man, he blew it over and over and over again, but it was always somebody else's fault. He blamed Samuel. Samuel, you weren't here. I'm here now. Why didn't you wait? Because you weren't here when I thought you were going to be here. Okay? Who else are you going to blame? Blame the people. Blame Jonathan. You took that honey with that spear. You're not supposed to eat anything. I mean, always blaming somebody. Always the victim. Telling the people, how come you don't think about me? I mean, the man played the fool. But another thing I think that stands out concerning the person that plays the fool, and what's sad, and we'll come to find out, is that they end in defeat rather than victory. They end in what could have been rather than what God wanted to do. God said this to Saul at one point through Samuel, the Lord would have established your kingdom. He would have. This was his intention. This is what he wanted to do. But because of your rebellion, because of your disobedience, because you make excuses, because you walk in pride instead of humility and disobedience, it's not happening. These were the consequences of his sin. And so in verse 22, David answered and said, here's the king's spear. Let one of the young men come over and get it. May the Lord repay every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord delivered you into my hand today. But I wouldn't stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed. And indeed, as your life was valued much this day in my eyes, so let my life be valued much in the eyes of the Lord. And let him deliver me out of all tribulation. Oh, folks, it's the Lord that delivers us out of all tribulation. The Bible says, in this world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. Jesus said, I have overcome the world. You will have trials. You will have hardship, but the Lord is able to deliver. And Saul said to David, may you be blessed, my son David. You shall both do great things and also still prevail. And David went on his way, and Saul returned to his place. Folks, it's worth pointing out here that these were the last words that would ever be spoken between David and Saul. Last conversation that they ever had was right here. They would not see each other and speak to each other again. As this chapter concludes, we see some similar lessons that we've learned before repeated. First of all, when you're waiting for God's promise to come to pass, you have to resist the temptation to take matters into your own hands and instead trust the Lord's timing and remain faithful. That is a lesson that you have to learn in this. David was learning that lesson. God had made promises, but he had to wait. A second lesson that we can observe is that when you are opposed, when you are attacked for doing what is right, you allow the Lord to be your defense, and you keep doing what God's told you to do and let the Lord sort out what's being said or what's being told about you. You give that over to the Lord. These are the things that David chose to do. He chose to wait when he could have taken matters into his own hands, and then he also chose to allow the Lord to be his defense and deliver him. Wow. As you come to chapter 27, although David was a man after God's own heart, he still had the heart of a man. And one minute you see him trusting God and writing psalms about how God's faithful. And the next minute you just see him get at the point where, you know what, whatever, I'm not doing this anymore. Look at this. As you come to chapter 27, David has had enough. I've had enough. Have you ever just had enough? I've had enough. Oh, that's where David is. And he's had enough in the midst of his trial. And look at what it says. Chapter 27, verse 1. And David, here's the danger, said in his heart. Now he's consulting with his own heart. Now I shall perish someday by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me that I should speedily escape to the lands of the Philistines, and Saul will despair of me to seek me anymore in any part of Israel, and I will escape out of his hand. Now in the past, we've noted it. When David was in trouble, where did he go? He went to the Lord. He sought the Lord. He said, bring the ephod here. Let's check out what God wants me to do. Let's see. Do I go up this way or do I go that way? And then it says he sought the Lord a second time. And the Lord said, I want you to go this direction. I mean, David would seek God for wisdom. Not now. At this point, he's running the show. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm tired of, this is it. I got to get out of town. I got to stop doing this. I'm tired of fighting this battle. And so he reasons within his own heart, and he comes to this decision, and it's not difficult, really. It's not difficult to see how David arrived at this conclusion. In fact, it's easy to sympathize with him when you think about it. I mean, Saul was constantly chasing him. He's got 600 men and their families to look after, moving from the wilderness to another wilderness, to another wilderness, to a desert, to a wilderness. I mean, this is from a cave to another cave. I mean, there's no way to live like a fugitive. And he himself is now married. He's got a family. They're in danger. The only problem with David reasoning in his own heart is that it led David to assume, notice this, the worst. When you start reasoning in your own heart, he arrived at the worst possible scenario. He said, there's nothing better for me. And then Saul, it's like, you got it all figured out. You got it all figured out. There's nothing better for you? Nothing? That you really? Are you, who's? David's calling the shots. One thing that you find in this chapter is that David seemed to forget about the promises of God. When you forget about the promises of God and you start looking to your own heart, you go to worst case scenarios. I mean, always. It's always going to, this is going to happen. How do you know that's going to happen? I don't know. I just have a feeling it's going to happen. Well, what if it doesn't happen? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Okay. David had been anointed. Jonathan confirmed his calling to be king. Abigail, his wife, confirmed his calling. Even Saul said, you're going to be king. David, doesn't matter. I'm going to the Philistines. David also, I think, at this moment when he was consulting in his own heart, he failed to remember the preservation of God. God had preserved him all of this time. They'd been protected. But in spite of the preservation of God, in spite of the promises of God, David could see no other alternative. And what he does is he arrives at the wrong conclusion when he says, there is nothing better for me than I should speedily escape to the land of the Philistines. It's not getting any better, so there's nothing better for me to do. I have no other choice. Rather than wait, David, through reasoning on his own that this is the only way, he arrived at the conclusion and he would not be swayed. You ever been that way or come across people like that? That where regardless of what God says, regardless of what God has promised, they have convinced themselves, they have arrived at a conclusion that this is the only thing to do. That's not the only thing to do. You think God just has one option? And there's only one option. What if there's multiple options and you just haven't thought about it? You remember in the early church before the Spirit of God was poured out on the day of Pentecost? The disciples, they were told one thing: go and wait in Jerusalem for the power of the Spirit to come upon you. That's it. That was all Jesus said. Just go there and wait. He didn't say, why don't you guys pick out another disciple because we lost one. Can you guys handle that for me? He didn't say that. He didn't say that, did he? He just said, go and wait. So what do they start doing? Peter's like, you know what? There's like 11 of us now. We need 12. So let's pick one out. Let's find another guy. Well, how are we going to find another guy? You know what? I think we should draw straws and see who's going to be the next guy. Let's cast lots. Cast lots to find out who's going to be the next one? All right, you take one, you take one, you take. And we'll just trust that whoever gets this lot, you're the disciple. And there was certain criteria. You had to be with them. You had to see the risen Savior. There were certain things that would include you. So they got this group. And Peter prays and he said, Lord, which of these two do you choose? Oh, we're narrowing it down, just these two? Pete didn't know that, hey, there's a guy coming pretty soon, later. His name's Saul. He's going to be Paul, the apostle. But Peter just took it on himself. I just think we need to do this. No, God didn't tell you to do that, but he did. What happened to that other guy? I don't know. I'm sure he did some good stuff. I don't know. But God didn't ask him to do that. Then the Spirit comes out and the church blows up and goes in every direction, but Saul gets saved. But here's the thing. You come across people that are just convinced in their mind, this is the only way to do it. You just think, have you prayed about it? I don't need to pray about it. Okay. And there's really nothing you can say. I love what one man said, A.W. Pink, he quoted, and he said, alas, when unbelief dominates us, God is forgotten, and deliverance, our own ease, obsess the mind, and hence it is that unless divine grace interpose, we seek relief in the wrong quarter and by unspiritual means. Reasoning within one's own heart led to thinking contrary to the word of God, which in turn led to arriving at the wrong conclusions, which then in turn led to the justification of one's actions. Did you get that? Reasoning in your own heart leads to thinking contrary to God's word, which in turn leads to arriving at the wrong conclusions, which leads to justification of your actions. Here's what David said: Saul's going to despair. He won't seek me anymore in this part of Israel, and I'll escape out of his hand. David reasoned that if he could make it into Philistine territory, then all of his problems would be over, because Saul wasn't man enough to come in and attack the Philistines, so I'll just hide out among them. In verse 2, then David arose, and he went over with 600 men who were with him to Achish, the son of Maoch, king of Gath. Remember, this is where Goliath was from? Gath. David goes to Gath. And so David dwelt with Achish at Gath, and he and his men, each man with his household, and David with his two wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the Carmelitess, and Nabal's widow, who was Nabal's widow. And it was told Saul that David had fled to Gath, so he sought him no more. Problem solved. I told you it was going to work, guys. I told you. I reasoned in my heart. You know what? Look what happened. He's not chasing us anymore. But where are you living? Gath? Philistines? It's a big deal. It's a big deal. David went over in his distress. David crossed the boundary that day. And not just a geographical one. We're going to see a little bit of a dark season in David's life. This is not the first time David went into Gath. You remember the first time he went in? Remember the first time he went into Gath? showed up with Goliath's sword? I mean, who does that? I mean, he did. And they thought, isn't this the guy that killed Goliath? And isn't that Goliath's sword? And David he played like he was crazy. He's like foaming at the mouth, scratching on doors, getting all weird. And they said, get this madman out of here. Last time you were in Gath, you were a nut job. Now you want to go back? You're back there and everything's cool? It's a different struggle. The difficulty of the situation was that David achieved, this is the thing, David achieved his desired end. Saul stopped pursuing him. The pressure was temporarily relieved. However, it was only temporarily relieved. At first glance, you could say, well, that's not so bad, reasoning within your own heart, because the plan worked. No more pressure from Saul. A person may say, well, I feel a lot of pressure, and that's why I drink. I feel a lot of anxiety, and so that's why I take that, or this is why I do this, or I do that. And what ends up being a temporary solution ends up into a much bigger problem. And it happens all the time, leading to an even greater battle. Listen, you can give in to the devil and you can have temporary peace or momentary enjoyment or a sense of freedom briefly, but a person who lives that way will assume things like, what do those people at the church know anyway? They don't know anything. They can't judge me. What does that pastor know? He knows nothing. I'm excited. This new season of my life. It's great. You don't know anything about my life. Don't judge me. That kind of thing. It happens. I've heard that. This is fun. I'm having a great time. I like these people. These are my friends. What's your problem? Okay, hey, listen, I'm going to step back and I'm going to let the Holy Spirit do what he's going to do, because obviously I can't reach you where you are. Your parents can't reach you where you are. You want to do your own thing? Okay, you can do your own thing, but listen, there's a price to pay. David, this is the sad thing, David achieved his desired goal, but it affected his life. And listen, folks, it also affected his behavior. He changed. This is a dark time in David's life. Verse 5, then David said to Achish, if I found favor in your eyes, let them give me a place in some town in the country that I may dwell there. For why should your servant, oh, you're his servant. Why should your servant dwell in the royal city with you? Give me some suburb somewhere. I'm your servant. So Achish gave him Ziklag that day. Therefore, Ziklag has belonged to the kings of Judah to this day. Now, the time that David dwelt in the country of the Philistines was 1 full year and 4 months. This was a rough year. Notice this, David found favor in the eyes of the enemy. David was given territory from the enemy, and David dwelt there in Philistine territory for 16 months. You're comfortable in this environment. If you read through the scriptures, you'll come to realize that Ziklag was supposed to be an occupied territory of God's people. When Joshua had divided the promised land, the territory was one of the spots given to Israel as their own. However, the enemy now had occupied it. The enemy was in control of this area, and God's people lived in subjection to their enemy. I believe that it is a danger that can occur when we see what we see taking place in David's life that's worth noting. David decides, he decides to settle and grow comfortable in enemy territory. He has found asylum amongst the enemies of God and of his people. And the thing that makes this scene so sad is, the whole time David's here, he lives a lie. He lives a lie. He has to compromise. He lies about everything. He lies. Look at what it says. Look at David's deception. If you look at verse 8. And David and his men went up and they raided the Geshurites and the Girzites and the Amalekites, for those nations were the inhabitants of the land of old, as you go to Shur, even as far as the land of Egypt. And notice this, whenever David attacked the land, he left neither man or woman alive, but took away the sheep, the oxen, the donkeys, the camels, the apparel, and he returned and came to Achish. And Achish would say, hey, where have you made a raid today? And David would say, against the southern area of Judah, or the southern area of the Jerahmeelites, or against the southern area of the Kenites. David would save neither man nor woman alive to bring news to Gath, saying, lest they should inform on us, saying, thus David did. And thus, notice this, and thus was his behavior all the time he dwelt in the country of the Philistines. So Achish believed David, saying, he has made his people Israel abhor him. Therefore, he will be my servant forever. Look at what happened. You start reasoning in your own heart. You realize this is my only option. I don't see any other way. Well, you're not asking the Lord for direction. You're calling the shots. So you forget about God's promises. You forget about God's preservation. You go to the enemy's camp. You end up staying there, lying to everybody, saying this and saying that, and nobody really knows God knows, but nobody really knows what's going on. And you're getting rid of everybody who could perhaps tell on you for what you're doing, and you don't leave anybody alive. I mean, this is a dark season for David. He changed his behavior because of where he decided to dwell. And the same happens to us. You hang around the wrong people, you will begin to be like that. If you go back to the old haunts, the old places, the old watering holes, whatever you want to call it, the old crew, the old posse, and whatever else you want to call it. Listen, it's not long before, what are you doing? Why are you behaving like that? Your behavior changes. You find you're very comfortable. I'm not comfortable anymore in certain environments. I used to be very comfortable in darkness. I got no problem. Just walk through, it doesn't bother me at all. I feel very comfortable here. I could see in darkness, I thought. But I don't feel comfortable in certain areas anymore. There's just certain places I'd rather not go. It's not a good spot for me. I don't want to be there. Things have changed. And I don't want my behavior to go back to what it once was. Last thing I want to do is become what I was before Jesus got a hold of me. David's behavior changed. Some commentators have tried to suggest that David was actually fighting battles that Saul was supposed to be fighting, giving him hey, he's actually doing really good. And he wouldn't leave anyone alive to tell the story. And he would lie that he'd been fighting against his own people. But he lies to Achish, and Achish believes him. And somebody said this concerning David at this season in his life. Here's what they said. David, at this point in his life, had exchanged the smile of God for the grin of the devil. He had exchanged his trust in the promises of God for the walls of Ziklag, which in only a short amount of time would be burned with fire. He made a mistake. He made a bad decision. A few more verses in chapter 28. Now it happened in those days that the Philistines gathered armies together for war to fight with Israel. And Achish said to David, you assuredly know that you will go out with me to battle, you and your men. And David said to Achish, surely you know what your servant can do. And Achish said to David, therefore, I will make you one of my chief guardians forever. The Philistines are now preparing for war. They're going to go fight Israel. And David's like, I'm in. I'm your guy. Let's go. Let's get it. I mean, he's ready to fight. Meanwhile, as they're preparing for war, Saul is trying to get wisdom and counsel. But notice where he goes. Samuel had died, and all Israel had lamented for him and buried him in Ramah in his own city. And Saul had put the mediums and the spiritists out of the land. That is, the witches and the people who were, casting spells and into the dark arts. And the Philistines gathered together and came and encamped against Shunem. So Saul gathered all Israel together, and they encamped at Gilboa. And when Saul saw that the army of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. And when Saul inquired of the Lord didn't answer him, either by dreams or by the Urim and the Thummim or by the prophets. Saul had gone so far away from the Lord wasn't speaking to him anymore. He couldn't hear the voice of the Lord anymore. Even though he inquired, he wasn't in a place where he could hear. And so what does he do? Well, Saul takes the next step, and it says in verse 7, find me a woman who's a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And he sent his servants, said to him, in fact, there is a woman who is a medium at Endor. So what does Saul do? Saul disguises himself, put on other clothes, and he went, and 2 men went with him. And they came to the woman by night and said, please conduct a seance for me and bring up for me the one that I shall name to you. I mean, look at Saul. Like how far down has this guy gone? I mean, he's seeking through demonic means some kind of answer. And so in verse 9, the woman said to him, look, you know what Saul's done, how he has cut off the mediums and the spiritists from the land. Why then do you lay a snare for my life and cause me to die? And Saul swore to her by the Lord, as the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing. I mean, still inciting the Lord as the Lord lives. I mean, you're at a seance and you're using the name of the Lord. How lost are you? Very lost. You don't even know what you're doing. And then it says, then the woman said, whom shall I bring up for you? And he said, bring Samuel up for me. And when the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice. And the woman spoke to Saul, saying, why have you deceived me? For you are Saul. And the king said to her, don't be afraid. What did you see? And the woman said, I saw a spirit ascending out of the earth. And he said to her, well, what is his form? She said, an old man is coming up, and he's covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived that it was Samuel, and he stooped with his face to the ground and bowed down. Now listen, people are going to be asking, what in the world is going on here? How did this happen? God is allowing something. God's allowing something. He's going to get a message to Saul. He's allowing it. And so it says here, verse 15, now Samuel said to Saul, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? Saul answered, I'm deeply distressed. The Philistines make war against me, and God's departed from me and doesn't answer me anymore, neither by the prophets nor by dreams. Therefore, I've called you that you might reveal to me what I should do. And Samuel said, why do you ask me? Seeing the Lord has departed from you and has become your enemy. And the Lord has done for himself as he spoke by me. For the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand, and he's given it to your neighbor, David. Because you did not obey the voice of the Lord, nor execute his fierce wrath upon Amalek. Therefore, the Lord has done this thing to you this day. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with you into the hand of the Philistines. And tomorrow, you and your sons will be with me. And the Lord will also deliver the army of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. And immediately, Saul fell full length on the ground. He was dreadfully afraid because of the words of Samuel. And there was no strength in him, for he hadn't eaten food all that day or night. For some reason, I don't know how exactly people ask this question. This is a common question. How did God allow this? Why did God allow this? I don't really know. I just know God allowed it. For some reason, God allowed Samuel to appear to Saul and to speak to him. And what did Samuel say? The exact thing he already said. God's word hadn't changed. It's the same thing. Samuel had already told him. Remember that day when he grabbed his garment, and Samuel's garment, and he moved and it ripped. And Samuel said, the same way you've ripped my garment, God's ripped the kingdom out of your hand. He's given it to your neighbor. He says the exact same thing. Nothing's changed. You were disobedient. We already been through this. This is the consequence of your sin. And so Saul hears it and he falls down. And the woman came to Saul and severely troubled and said, look, your maidservant has obeyed your voice. I put my life in my hands and heeded the words which you spoke to me. Therefore, please heed the voice of your maidservant and let me set a piece of bread before you and eat, that you may have strength when you go out on your way. But he refused and said, I will not eat. So his servants came with the woman and urged him and heeded their voice. And he rose from the ground, sat on the bed. And the woman had a fatted calf in the house, hastened to kill it. She took flour and kneaded it, baked unleavened bread from it. So she brought it before Saul and his servants, and they ate. And they rose and they went away that night. What a contrast, you know? David, if David had just waited, did you really? Why'd you go? David didn't know what God was doing behind the scenes with Saul. We got to see it, but David didn't know. It was just a matter of time before things were about to change. But David he just couldn't wait any longer. Just can't. I'm done waiting. I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of being in this situation. I'm tired of waiting for her to get saved. I'm tired of waiting for him to come around. I'm tired of waiting for them to come back. I'm sick of this. I'm tired of that. Listen, you don't know what God's doing. What if something's about to happen? What if God's about to change the trajectory? God can do it. We sang you're more than able. What if that's about to happen and you're giving up before? What if you're right on the edge of what God's about to do and you just say, well, I have no other option, so this is what I'm doing. Really, God has all kinds of options. You know, our understanding can be so limited. We don't understand what God's doing or how he's doing it or where it would come from or how we could provide it. We're short-sighted sometimes. I'm short-sighted. I don't see how God could do it. I feel like there's times when God says, hey, you have little faith, John. Haven't you seen me work in your life? How come you doubt me now? How come all this time, your entire life, I have carried you, I have walked with you, I've provided with you, and now what do you think we're done? You got one option that you came up with? I mean, come on. What if God's about to do something? Don't stop. Don't give up believing that God's going to do something. David just checked out, man. He checked out for 16 months, and it had a radical impact on his life. It changed his behavior. It changed everything. By the grace of God, we're going to see he comes back. But I've watched people wander, backslidden for no reason. There's no reason. You don't need to go there for 16 months and come back disheveled and wrecked Or maybe you've been in Philistine territory. How about that? Maybe you've been there for 16 months, 5 months, 3 months. Maybe you've gone back and said, I'm tired. I can't. Listen, it's not too late to come back into the camp, man. Come back. Get out of Gath, would you? Come back. The Lord wants to restore you and bless you. He's not done with you. He has plans for you. We sang it. We believe it. I don't know who that's a word for tonight, but somebody here, it's a word for you. And if you're like David and you just think, I'm done. I'm giving up. I'm sick of this. I'm going to Gath. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Trust the Lord. Wait it out. He's got way more options than you and I can come up with. Let's pray together. Father, thank you for reminding us tonight that you're more than able. Why would we doubt you, Lord? Sometimes we get frustrated, we get discouraged, we're just tired of fighting the battle, and we think, I don't want to do this anymore. And yet, Lord, you're using it in our lives to refine us, to teach us, to grow us. And God, I don't know where folks are tonight, but I do believe that the Spirit of God is speaking tonight. I just sense that, Lord. In my own life, I just sense you're speaking, Lord, to some folks tonight. And I just pray that you would remind them that you love them. God, you're not done with them. There's no reason to give up or quit or grow weary in well-doing. Lord, there's things you're going to do, and I just pray that we would trust you, Lord. You keep your word. You do what you say. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Church, would you take a moment? Would you stand with us? And would you take the next 5 minutes, and would you circle up and would you pray for the nation of Israel? Would you pray for the peace of Jerusalem? Just as the Lord leads you in that prayer group, let's intercede, guys. Let's pray.